He texted from a club. "Oops, missed your surgery. Flights are crazy." I read the message with my hand pressed against the sterile hospital bed rail, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like distant static, the scent of antiseptic mixed with my own fear, sharp, metallic, real. My wrist throbbed where the IV dug in, my body still fragile from the anesthesia. And there it was, the casual cruelty, the flippant excuse, as if my surgery were a minor inconvenience in his weekend plans. I could hear the muffled laughter of visitors in the hallway, the soft clatter of a nurse's cart, the world continuing without pause for the sharp betrayal of someone I trusted. I let my lips curl just slightly. Not in anger, not yet, but in quiet calculation. He had thought absence was enough to hurt me. I would prove him wrong, silently, precisely, where it would matter most. I've always been the quiet one, the invisible corner of every room, the smile that nodded while the world passed me by. People assumed I was harmless, too polite, too steady, too focused on keeping peace. I grew up watching promises slip like sand through my fingers. A father who dismissed my dreams, friends who cheered louder for themselves than for me, lovers who treated attention as a currency I had to beg for. He was no different. Charismatic, careless, convinced that my patience meant weakness. I believed him once, laughed at his jokes, let him in while keeping my own boundaries faint, blurry. Every oops and crazy schedule became a pattern, a quiet erosion of my sense of self. But beneath the stillness, I noticed. I cataloged slights, remembered every missed moment, every thoughtless word. The world assumed I would forgive, or forget. That assumption has been my greatest advantage. I am not quick to anger. I am deliberate, observant, patient, and when the time comes, I will act with precision so clean it leaves no trace of doubt. He will learn that underestimating me was the first mistake he ever made. He showed up at the hospital the day after my discharge, arms full of helium balloons, a grin that assumed forgiveness was automatic. I didn't meet his eyes. The security guard nodded at me, then at him. And he froze, just for a second, just enough to notice. That pause spoke louder than any apology. In the hallway, his words dripped casual charm. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said, voice light, like a ribbon brushing against a wound. I smiled faintly, letting the silence stretch before answering. "Surprises are easier when they're wanted," I said, soft and precise. He blinked. Every interaction with him was a lesson in small betrayals. Texts ignored, last-minute cancellations, jokes at my expense in front of friends. Each one seemed trivial, until lined up like a gallery of micro-traumas, exposing the pattern. He never considered me fully, never accounted for my time or my pain. I watched him fumble with the balloons, his posture shifting under the weight of invisible judgment. The subtle chill in the air wasn't the hospital's air conditioning. It was me, quiet, observing, waiting. He had underestimated patience. He had underestimated me, and every misstep he made only tightened the net I was weaving around him. I watched him hover near the nurse's station, arranging his balloons with that same careless charm, and something inside me snapped, not in anger, not in spectacle, but in clarity. All the small betrayals, all the dismissals, all the oops messages crystallized into a single truth. I had been patient long enough. I stepped into the corridor, measured, calm, letting every movement broadcast control without a word. Security already knew his name, his face, his history with me. I didn't have to shout, didn't have to explain. The quiet weight of consequence was already in place. He smiled, a flicker of charm still clinging to him, and I let my gaze hold him. No lecture, no theatrics, just the silent, unyielding presence of someone who had finally decided that respect was not optional. In that instant, I realized the elegance of restraint. Revenge didn't need fireworks or drama. It needed timing, observation, and the confidence to act while the world assumed nothing was happening. He had taken me for granted, assumed I would bend. And in that pause, while he still believed in his charm, I understood that patience, when paired with precision, could be more devastating than any outburst. I didn't rush. I reviewed every detail of our interactions, every text, every oops, every missed promise, as though mapping a battlefield. I knew that timing was everything, that even a small misstep could unravel the entire plan. I contacted the hospital administration, not in anger, but professionally, citing policy, procedure, and safety. My requests were framed as concern for patient well-being, documented and precise. I double-checked visitor lists, cross-referenced names with hospital protocols, ensured security had clear instructions. Every measure was airtight, leaving no loophole for charm or excuses to bypass consequences. I drafted my own notes calmly, logically, like a strategist preparing a chessboard. I had learned from past betrayals that silence often spoke, louder than confrontation. The plan didn't rely on anger. It relied on order, procedure, and leverage that only someone who knew the rules could deploy. Even the balloons, the gestures, the casual assumptions, they became predictable variables, incorporated into a system I controlled. I was not impulsive. I was methodical. By the time he tried to act, every step, every breath he took, was moving through a space I had already designed. I was invisible yet unavoidable. The lesson would be unmistakable, delivered with quiet inevitability. He arrived the next morning, bright balloons in hand, confidence brimming like it always did. I watched from my bed, motionless, letting the world play out as if I were part of the scenery. Security intercepted him before he even reached the nurse's station, their gestures polite but firm. A silent choreography I had orchestrated. His grin faltered, the air in the hallway thickening with tension he couldn't name. He stammered, attempting charm, offering excuses that dissolved under the weight of protocol. I said nothing. My eyes held steady, calm, patient, an unspoken verdict heavier than any words could carry. The balloons drooped in his hands, helium fighting gravity, just as his confidence struggled against consequences. Nurses whispered quietly. Visitors glanced curiously, and for the first time, he was the one small uncertain exposed. Every flippant text, every missed call, every casual dismissal had led to this. A moment of quiet reckoning, measured and undeniable. And when he finally turned to leave, shoulders tight, dignity fraying at the edges, I felt the satisfaction that only comes from patience perfected. No spectacle, no shouting, just the simple, exacting proof that underestimating me had been his gravest mistake. The hallway emptied slowly, but the echo of his misstep lingered. Nurses exchanged discreet glances. Security nodded at me with quiet approval, and even the receptionist, who had seen countless entitled visitors, gave a subtle, knowing smile. I could feel the shift in the air. Respect, previously absent, had finally been acknowledged. He retreated, shoulders tight, dignity fraying. A man confronted not by fury but by precision. For him, the embarrassment was sharp, immediate, unforgettable. For me, it was affirmation. That self-respect and measured patience could outweigh charm and bluster. That being underestimated was not weakness, it was leverage. The stakes were never just about a single slight or a missed surgery. They were about patterns, boundaries, and the quiet assertion of self-worth. Every person watching, staff, visitors, even casual onlookers, saw the consequences of taking someone's patience for granted. In that stillness, the lesson became universal. Respect is earned, not assumed. Carelessness has consequences, even when masked by charm. And silent, deliberate action often speaks louder than the loudest confrontation. For anyone who has been dismissed or ignored, it was a reminder. You can reclaim power calmly, deliberately, and without losing yourself in anger. The aftermath settled like dust in sunlight. The tension in the hospital hallways dissipated, leaving only a quiet awareness. I had acted not out of spite, but out of clarity and self-respect. My body, still recovering from surgery, felt lighter, not from the absence of pain, but from the weight lifted by agency and control. I realized that patience and observation were more than virtues. They were tools, sharpened through years of being underestimated. I no longer needed validation from him, or anyone who treated carelessness as inconsequence. The lesson had been delivered without theatrics, and in that silence, I found satisfaction deeper than any confrontation could offer. Looking forward, I understood boundaries weren't punishments, they were protections. Reminders that respect is never optional. I would carry this precision into every corner of my life, quietly reinforcing what I would and would not tolerate, shaping a world that recognized me without requiring drama or noise. And when I finally allowed a small smile, it wasn't for him, or even for the observers, it was for myself. The lesson lingered, unspoken yet absolute. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is the one that leaves you whole, while others are left to reckon quietly with their own choices.